Okay, Crystal Griffith here, and welcome back for your daily digest of emotions, wisdom, and your body. This is what happens when you have this enlightening conversation right before you have to get on live and you can't remember what you're doing. Every day for 2021, we're delving deeper for about 15 or 20 minutes, and maybe a couple minutes after that, on how your emotions are affecting your body, soul, and spirit. And I am not a doctor. I do not play one on TV, but what I do is research. I also have my master's, healing trauma certifications, and several accreditations. But really, this is for your edification, your encouragement, and your education. Tonight's word, it's a doozy based on the conversation I just got out of. It's miserable. Have you ever met somebody who's miserable? They're so miserable. Their whole goal in life is to make everyone around them just miserable. Yeah. I suspect we've all met a couple people like that along the way. Miserable really goes way past sad. It usually means absolutely wretched. And I think in light of the conversation I just had with somebody, I think that person would be deemed wretched. Absolutely. So unhappy, so uncomfortable, being in really a pitiable state of distress, of unhappiness, and perhaps that's from want or shame, exceptionally unhappy. They manage to find the worst in everything, always finding the downside. They really even hate their friends because misery loves company, right? So they find miserable people to be friends with. And they put up with it because they're just as miserable as the first person. They spend as much time as possible distracting themselves from reality. Addictions of many sorts. The first thing they do every morning is really just get upset about having to get up. Yeah, these are doozies. They give lip to whoever and whenever the opportunity arises. They like to point out the flaws in everybody else. This is a little worse than just being critical. This is like nonstop. They don't like themselves very much, but they still think that they're better than the rest of the world, and they think they can get away with it. And they believe that those who are happy must be ignorant, yet they're still jealous that they can't be happy themselves. This is quite a conundrum that miserable people stay in the middle of. And really, whether this is negative or positive, this is one of the only ones I've come across so far in the 45 days that we've been doing this. Negative with a capital N. A miserable person has an extremely difficult time listening because all they hear is the negatives about anything. You're going to Disneyland. Oh, I got to pack. It's so hot. I got to figure out the plane fare. Where are we going to eat? You get the drift. Their sour dispositions give them selective hearing, and they tune out almost everything else. It was really kind of interesting trying to identify the body effects for this, because every time I would look things up, and I'm quite the innovative researcher to find some of this information, and all I could find was stress. And miserable people are really living under stress, and stress causes the amygdala to hijack, and then they become a little terrorist for long term, and then that leads to hostility. And then the hostility leads to premature death. It's a pretty direct route. So can you have too much miserable nature, miserable emotions, miserability? Oh, yeah. How? Well, you compare yourself to others all the time. This is not just keeping up with the Joneses. This is literally you comparing yourself in face, in body, in car, in house, in job, in kids, in accolades, in certifications, in anything, even relationships with God. Like, it's amazing when you come across a miserable person, they will find everything in their brother to compare it to. It's like they have to one up you, but they're never happy even if they're winning it. And it's not a winning competition anyways. Your family, they may actually tell you as a miserable person to cheer up at least once a day. If you're miserable, people will avoid sitting beside you in even public transportation because of the vibes that are given off by miserable people. It's like, this is worse than the grumpy old men look. This is like energy just coming off of them, almost as bad as a bad stench, but it's a vibe. It's this spiritual peace and frequency that just exudes off of them. And you're like, dude, I want none of that, right? You don't even want to sit by them. You just know it's there, right? And honestly, it's kind of funny. I loved this one. You just can never get a good selfie. I just thought that was the funniest line from miserable people. Like they're trying to get a selfie and they just don't like any of them. They're just, none of them are good. I just thought that was the funniest thing. And miserable people, you'll often be told like you've just been to a funeral. Have you been to a funeral? Did you just come from a funeral? Like you look that dejected. It's pretty bad. I actually feel bad for the people who have had to go to funerals because they shouldn't be compared to people who are miserable. And then this other one is kind of fun. People often think you're giving them dirty looks. That's how your face looks. It's a very outwardly physical look to be miserable. This is not fun. Nobody enjoys this from anybody who's miserable at all. There's no joy at all. And life, everything's about death and curses and just beyond anger. And really, I think in a lot of ways, it borderlines on hate, to be honest. It's such a hatred for life that they're that miserable. They can't enjoy anything. So is there any hope? Yeah, there's always hope. Are you breathing? If you're breathing, there's hope, folks. So first step, just like in any other ones, acknowledge and be aware. Recognize the unhappiness that you are experiencing. Offer yourself some compassion because something really has you stuck there. Give yourself permission to be happy. You don't have to be in that rut. You don't have to stay stuck there. You can actually give yourself permission to be happy whenever possible. So one of the things that we do in inner healing is called a collarbone. These are our positive declarations that we're speaking over our body, soul, and spirit. And oftentimes when you speak things out loud, you are blessing or cursing, right? It is death or life. And so same concept. So you find your collarbones, and I think we've done this with a couple of other emotions. Find your collarbones, it's kind of that tender spot. Oh yeah, found it. That tender spot right about there. Now some people are over here a little more, mine's a little further out. And so you just can tap or you can rub those in a circle and say out loud, I give myself permission to be happy. I give myself to enjoy life. I give myself permission to receive life, to enjoy it, right? And then tap that in right there. So if you want more on that, that's called EFT, and we'll talk about that another day. So sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to stop being where we are. We have to give ourselves permission to stop being stuck. And we get in that rut sometimes and we don't know how to get out of it. So we think we have to stay in it, but you don't. Another one is really experience some pleasing and healthy distractions. So if you know all you want to do is stay isolated in your house, then what could you do? Get out of your house. Yes, even in the middle of a quarantine, you can get out of your house. You can walk down the street. You can go to a park. You can ride in a car with all your windows down. It's amazing what fresh air does for somebody, right? But you can do that. So just stop isolating yourself. Hold tightly to your self-care program. What are you doing to actually help yourself enjoy life? To be free, to have a breath of fresh air. What are you doing to help yourself with that self-care program? Seek out creative and meaningful activities, things that are actually going to change your life. Instead of doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result, that's called insanity. It's a very short road to that. Realize that everything changes. Man, guys, we go through ebbs and flows, hills and valleys, mountain peaks, and down the road on the other side, right? I was just watching somebody the other day and they were talking about climbing Mount Everest. And this was really interesting. So if you hear marketing and it says, we have a 93% success rate to get you to the top of Mount Everest, right? That's awesome. 93%. Do it, man. Get it. That's the ascent side, right? The question that you then have to ask, though, is what's the percentage of coming back down the other side? Because typically you do not come back down the mountain the way you went up the mountain. And so this is the ascent and the descent, right? So the ascent can have a 93% success rate of getting up to the top of the mountain. But the descent side, it was actually like 60%. Like a lot of people, when they climb Mount Everest, it's not good to come down. It would be better for somebody to fly up there and take you off the peak than to try and come down that mountain. Not that I think you can do that, but I'm just saying coming down is actually harder than going up. And a lot of people think, oh, if I get to the top of the mountain, then I can just roll right back down, right? Yeah, not so much. So really important that we understand everything changes. We can go up, we can go down, we can go back up, we can go back down. So those ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys, everything is going to change. Everything has seasons to it, everything in your life. So even though you might be in a situation where you feel absolutely miserable right now, keep in mind your eye on the goal that it is going to change and position yourself to receive the change. If you're back over here still thinking that insanity way of everything you do is the same way and expecting different results, then you're not repositioning yourself to have something different happen. And that's something you can control. Reposition yourself, right? Change one small aspect of your situation. If all you ever do is eat cereal, then why don't you try eggs tomorrow? If eggs are not going to be your friend, then maybe try a salad. Or the next day, try a baked potato. Or the next day, try some soup. You know, there's a variety of things out there that you can try. And that's just on the food chain kind of thing. But if all you do is watch TV, what if you turned it off? What if you read a book? What if you read just one page of a book? What if you played a game? What if you put 4 pieces of puzzle together? What if you just walked around your house, not even around the neighborhood, just around your house? Every small step leads to bigger steps. Ask for help. Just be real. We all need it. There's not one person on this planet that doesn't need help. Not one. Help others. You know, we do live in a situation right now where a lot of other people could use some help. So maybe you're it. Maybe you have a spare room. Maybe you have a spare sleeping bag. Maybe you've got some spare granola bars and you can make up a little bag and pass them out to people who are on the street. There's a variety of things that you can do. And then be grateful for what you have. We forget to do that. And gratitude, I can tell you, can change your entire life. I actually got to interview a young lady. Her name is Jennifer. And she spent like 7 years trying to figure out how to get healthy. Like she just had these horrible, horrible illnesses and no one could figure them out with the doctors. And she just stumbled upon gratitude and began to spend more and more time in gratitude. And within just a few months, what they couldn't figure out for 7 years had begun to start healing in her in just a few months. Like it's just unreal what gratitude really can do because it changes our outlook and it allows us the opportunity, permission again, to enjoy what's in and around us. And that is living, folks. That's what you want to start doing, is start living. Now, again, inner heart healing can always help you identify the root for that miserableness. Let's pull that sucker out of there, man. We don't want that root. That's for sure. So what are your 3 wisdom verses? Proverbs 15:15. All the days of the oppressed are miserable. Yep. If you're miserable, you're also oppressed. And if you're oppressed, I guarantee you're miserable. But a cheerful heart has a continued feast. James 4:9. Be miserable and mourn and weep. There's a time and a season. But your laughter must change to mourning and your joy can be to sorrow. And so they're saying to you, you can do this for a season, but not forever. It's just a season. 1 Corinthians 15:19. If in this life only we have hope in Christ, then we are all the men most miserable. So we can have our hope in Christ and we cannot be miserable, right? So if that is it, if all we have is our hope in Christ, we can't possibly be miserable because it's Christ and he's the Prince of Peace. And so therefore, if we have hope in him and he's living in us, then we are walking in peace. and take heart. He's overcome the world, right? So how are you going to use this new information about being miserable? And no, don't go and start dubbing, oh yeah, you're miserable. You need to work on that. That's not going to help your friendship, right? So how has this been working in your life? Now remember, wisdom is not just the hearing, but also the understanding and the application of it. So how has miserable been showing up in your life? Has it been negative? I suspect so. Even if you're encountering it, right, from somebody else. And how can you transform it? So if you're faced with it, it's not within you, it's not something you're doing, but somebody else in your life that you have to interact with on a consistent basis is miserable. How can you now change your reaction to them by having learned all this information? What does that look like? Is there an encouragement that you could offer them that maybe they hadn't thought to do? And maybe instead of going, I don't want to deal with you anymore, right? Maybe you could go in a different way, in a different expectation. And guess what that's going to do? It's going to disrupt their normal. And they will know what to do with it. It's going to be awesome. Disrupt the normal. Tomorrow's word is insignificant. Insignificant. Oftentimes, what I have seen, people who feel miserable actually feel insignificant. Isn't that interesting? So we're going to delve a little deeper into that one tomorrow. So join us again for more emotions, wisdom in your body tomorrow night or tomorrow. I'll try and get earlier. We'll see. Register at kcrystalgriffith.com to receive more insights and your feelings wheel. And I'm so excited today. I got to speak with somebody and it was so cool. I said, like, have you registered? Have you gotten your feelings wheel? She goes, no, I'm going to do that right now. I'm like, I'm so glad you are. And so she's going to take my suggestion of printing several copies, getting them laminated, putting them around the house. And then she's going to be like, when I see it, I'm going to stop and ask myself, just like you suggested, I go, what am I feeling right now? Get in touch with those feelings, folks. They love you, you love them, and we all work together. Until then, you guys have a blessed night.